Mambo Vipi, what's happening? My name is Anyiko, Owoko, and I am a lover of arts, culture, and everything African. And here, we grant you front row access to your favorite celebrities, creators, the biggest personalities, and industry experts. Come with me. You're now a VIP. This is what to expect on this week's episode.
Just the hype that you create. It comes from, the structures that you put in. Structure is a thing that pays. And it comes to a point where some emerging DJs find it really tricky to be able to get that exposure that they want. It's a bit unstable in some certain situations. For me as a DJ as well, I've gone through the same thing. And that's why Studio Canvey, we don't want to kind of select an artist and say, we want you to come and play. We want everyone who has like this inkling to be able to say something, to come and explore, to come and test out, to feel safe. And if we create this ecosystem, I think it'll allow a small shift in the creative culture in Nairobi.
What I've done for a long time is play percussion. I've always been a rhythm maker and it's always been my foundation. However, I've noticed that when I'm playing stories, people pay attention, you guys. And when I go home, I always ask myself, hey, Kwani, why are these people paying so much attention? It's like they don't want other people to speak. They want you to just tell the story. And that gave me the confidence to believe that there's something there. It starts by noticing it, and then I put work into it. First, I noticed it, and then I welcomed it, and I wanted to know that part of myself.
The only real problem you're going to have in life is dealing with yourself. So deal with that first. And then the only competition you're ever going to have is yourself. So you deal with that. And then it's about taking on the challenges that make you feel uncomfortable, working in areas that you're not used to. When you do that and it works, you get more confidence. The more confidence you have, the more opportunities that come, the more things you'll do because you're not afraid of doing them. I believe intrinsically everybody is an artist. Everybody has a story. Everybody has something to say. And to be able to help facilitate that for other people. Actually, as a producer, it's much easier for me to produce other people and pull that genius out of them than it is to do it for myself.
Hey, what's up, guys? What do you do? Thank you for coming back right here to VIP Access. This week is an exciting one for me because we're discussing what success looks like for artists in 2026. What does it really mean to be a successful artist in 2026? Before we get into it, I'm really excited because we recorded this particular conversation at the most recent Kilele Summit that happened at the Mall Westlands. Thank you so much to Kilele Summit team for collaborating with Industry Talks and Goethe Institute for also facilitating that collaboration. It was such a wonderful event. I've always wanted the Industry Talks family to cross-collaborate with other communities, and we finally got a chance. You will listen to our conversation. It was so amazing. So this week, we have Kasiva Mutua, Jesse Mwenda, and Martin Youth Glover on the podcast. They all bring diverse perspectives on what artistic success looks like today. Kasiva represents a new generation of African artists, blending traditional storytelling and contemporary sound, while Jesse offers insight into building creative communities and infrastructure through his work as a DJ and founder of Studio Canvey. We'll tell you more about Studio Canvey. Youth, on the other hand, comes from the UK, and he's bringing over 3 decades of global industry experience as a musician and producer who has navigated multiple eras of the music business. Together, their experiences span artistic creation, community building, and international industry evolution. For a long time, the music industry has measured success through numbers: streams, charts, followers, and visibility. While those metrics can reflect financial success, they don't always capture something deeper, artistic success. And for me, I feel like every artist is different and unique in their own right. And if all artists are chasing one definition of success, it's definitely not going to work. How do artists cut through the noise and make their voices heard while staying true to their craft? This is what we're going to be discussing this week. But before we start the discussion, please allow me to profile the guests on the podcast this week. Kasiva Mutua is one of Kenya's leading percussionists and a dynamic storyteller, singer, a songwriter, and a producer whose work blends African tradition with contemporary sound. Inspired by her grandmother's folk tales, she uses rhythm as a tool for storytelling, cultural preservation, and gender equity. Kasiva has performed on global stages including TEDx, the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, and collaborated with global platforms including Coke Studio Africa. She's also the founder of Motra Music, an all-female drumming collective empowering young women through music, and recently released her debut album, Desturi, in 2025. Jessie Mwenda, on the other hand, is a Kenyan DJ, architect, and sustainable design advocate whose work sits at the intersection of music, community, and social impact. The self-taught DJ, since the age of 14, has performed in cities including Nairobi, London, Istanbul, and Barcelona. In 2022, he founded Studio Canvi, a platform dedicated to amplifying emerging talent and strengthening DJ-led communities, which gained international recognition after winning a global grant from Jägermeister's Save the Night Fund. Martin Youth Glover is an influential producer, composer, and bass innovator with a career spanning more than 3 decades, rising to prominence with the post-punk band Killing Joe, and later co-creating the electronic music project The Orb. Youth has played a key role in shaping ambient, house, and dub-influenced electronic music. He has also produced and remixed music for major artists including U2 and the Banshees, De La Soul, and Paul McCartney. On today's episode, we're going to explore what success looks like for artists today beyond the numbers, from access to resources and infrastructure to the realities of building a career in music. We're going to unpack how artists can balance artistic integrity with professional survival. How do you define success as an artist in 2026? Let's get into it.
My name is Kasiva Mutua, as you've heard. You might know me, you might not know me as a percussionist. I'm a storyteller. I can see family in the room. There's my cousin. There is my co-parent of our new album, Ngomani Banje Wagon. And I'm a lover of music. I'm a very fierce defender of women's rights, and especially I fight for women's rights in music spaces. And I'm really happy to be here because it's very interesting that we have this discussion about success, because it's something I've been deeply thinking about in this season. And so I'm really ready to learn, but also share what I have encountered so far. So thank you so much for having me.
Karibu. And then next we have Jessie Mwenda of Studio Canvi. In case you have been following the newest DJ collective in town, Studio Canvi, Jessie is behind it. Jessie, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie. I'm really excited to be here. It's my first time at the summit. I've walked around and I've seen so many different things. I do want to take some time to just walk upstairs, speak to everyone, but it seems really cool that everyone here has their own kind of thing that they're doing. Very innovative, very technical, musical. I like it. So I'm glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
And to an icon who's visiting us from Britain, the iconic and legendary Martin Youth Glover, who has worked in the music scene for several years, worked with underground artists, mainstream artists in production, in mainstream media. We are so glad to have you here. Could you also please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Youth. I'm a writer, songwriter, musician, artist, label manager, and I've co-founded different societies like the South London Arts Lab and Society for the Reformation of Ancient Enchantment, and work with many artists internationally across the board, from underground to established. And my main role, I suppose, is a writer-producer. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Karibu. When you came into the industry, or when you decided you wanted to do this thing in the industry, how did you view success, and how do you view success right now?
I started making records at 17, playing in bands at 15. And at that age, success was just being able to do it next week. I'm now 64 and success is still the same as being able to keep doing it is my idea of success. And of course, things have changed so much over the last 30, 40 years. In many ways, it's much harder, but in some ways, it's much easier. So the old model of major labels signing you for years, you being in debt for years, that's kind of gone now. And now we're in an arena of lots of independence, and majors don't really bother you until you're really big anyway. How you build up yourself as an artist now has changed, but it's still the fundamental things. You have to play live. You've got to come out of a community. You'd like to think, oh, I can just make this amazing music and everybody will get it. It doesn't work like that. You have to come out of a scene or a community. This is why I started an arts lab in London about 7, 8 years ago, because with the resources you have within an arts lab, it's much bigger than a label or a band. And there's someone there that can do digital promotion. There's someone there that can do posters. Everyone can get involved on every level. And it's amazing the results that come out of that kind of community. And one of the first things that comes out is little scenes. Even if it's you taking over a bar on a dead night 1 day a week with a couple of friends and slowly pulling people in, building a community, building a scene, that's really important to connect to somehow. And that will somehow elevate you into a place where people can recognize and see what you're doing. And then from that point, it's about getting solid representation with a manager, someone who can monetize your art, which is increasingly difficult to do, an agent who can get you gigs, all those things. And then eventually getting more control over your work. You mentioned Kate Bush. She started off with EMI in an era where solo female artists weren't given the opportunity to produce themselves or take control of their recordings. So her first 3 albums were produced by other people. Then she started producing herself. I mean, it was hard-earned pressure on her with her label to be able to do that. And the first album she did that with, The Dreaming, wasn't successful, but she still managed to push through, get all her advances, collate all her money, reinvest it in a studio at her home, and make Hounds of Love, which is one of the best albums ever made, and produce and write it herself. And she became the template of how successful artists, not just female, but men, can take control of that. She now owns her own catalogue of everything and is very in control of how that's distributed. And so I think that one artist is a great example of how you can go through the system that is rigged against you, let's be honest, go through it and then come out the other side in control of it. And that's really inspiring. So I think for every artist, that's really where you want to end up. You won't get there straight away, but that's a destination you kind of want to look for.
I mean, you have so much more experience than all of us, which I think is, it's incredible to be even to sit here with you and have this conversation. But I think for me as well, it's the same thing, like the blueprint of going from dependency to like ownership. That is, I think, success for every artist, DJ, producer, whatever. And having your own claim over your own sound, over your own audience. And that, I think, is like the epitome of success for an artist. And I think that's exactly what you were saying about Kate Bush. I'm going from, her own studio to be able to produce, to create one of the biggest albums ever. That's exactly what I think success is.
As a young artist and a new artist coming through, we all need a champion. And often it's the label or manager that will charge into the industry on your behalf. And as you get more and more in control of that gets less and less, and it's you having to go out and do the promotion. Sure, generally very hard for artists, but you still need that dynamic, I think. But it's just about eventually you getting the reward from it financially. I mean, that's the bottom line. Yeah.
Well, I like to deconstruct the term success. I was thinking about it when I was coming here. And when I think about success, there's a couple of words that pop into my mind. time, change, work, and failure. The opposite of success is failure. But then the term or the name success would not be coined if there was no failure. So I like to look at it from that lens. So what does failure mean to you and what does success mean to you? I looked at my EPK this week. I was updating it. Update is another word. I was updating my EPK, and when I was done, I looked at the old version that I had sent out a couple of years ago, and then I looked at the new one, and I saw change, I saw growth, I saw movement, I saw different. And for me, those terms that I'm speaking out so boldly, for me, attribute to what success is. In 2010, I hadn't left the country yet. And in 2026, I have a little map where I'm putting pins. So that's growth and that's success. In 2013, 14, 15, I used to travel, but I would travel to go and collaborate with musicians from other countries in their countries. And many a times, I would be the only Kenyan in that cohort. For example, there's One Beat, there's Making Tracks in the UK, there's the Nile Project, which was, a group of musicians from all the countries along the Nile Basin coming together to make music, to start a conversation about water politics and so on and so forth. I was often the only Kenyan there, and I had been brought by the institution. In 2026, I am the one who has taken a group of 4 musicians from Kenya to go to a Kasiva tour. So for me, that's success. In 2015, I was a percussionist who sat in people's bands, and I gave my heart and percussion and gave life to their music. In 2026, I have 3 bodies of work out, and for me, that's success, and I'm touring that music, so that's success. What I'm trying to tell you, I'm not bragging about my success. I mean, in Kenya, there's a word we like using, umsame make it. And I want to speak to you in that kumake it, because that's the term we understand. Kumake it is making it. But in Kiswahili, it has a spice in it, right? Umsame make it. But what is kumake it to you? Because your kumake it is not my kumake it. Perhaps when you wake up in the morning and are able to put a meal on the table with your hard and ways and with your hands, make it to the end of the day. If you get out 60 records, make it kimziki. If you're Beyonce or Jay-Z, make it unistar, they're famous. But if we deconstruct what success really is movement. I woke up in the morning and I connected my DSP there, and I'm on my microphone and I'm writing a line. And in the evening, you're bopping to it. That's success. And there's measures to success, I think. So I think we should put our own measures, because I put my own measures. That's how I look at success. You can have your levels and even color-coded as I have mine. Red is like, I'm very successful, you know what I mean? But the shades that lead to red should be accorded the respect. And I think we need to look at it keenly and understand that one step, just one little step, is success. It might not be money, but it holds value in itself in very different ways. Because value is not just money. A network is value. Barter trade was our value for a very long time before currency was introduced. So I tend to think that success is change, it's hard work, it's movement, it's a step forward, and it's the recognition of failure. It's also stepping back and then stepping ahead, moving. It's moving. So success for me is moving, and there wouldn't be success without failure. So I think if we look intricately at what failure means, it's a very important spice in the making of the pilau that is success, I think.
I see Jesse, I see Studio Canvi. Of course, I see the architect as well, and someone who is passionate about transforming nightlife. So I've always wondered, what's the story of a DJ? Where does a DJ go to? If you're not on radio, if you're not being booked for gigs and stuff, like, what does a DJ want to achieve? And again, I guess there's different DJs looking for different things. But like for you, when you started DJing, what did you want to achieve? And did you ever think you would transform yourself and career to what it is today? If you could just recount to us from that moment where you wanted to be a DJ to now having Studio Canvi, which is empowering DJs. And also you'll explain to us what Studio Canvi is.
For me, the story kind of started in high school. We used to have this group of people where we would go to assemblies and we would play around with the EQs just to see how it sounds, like the volume of the mic, the volume of the speakers in the back. And this is when Tomorrowland was also a really massive thing. So electric dance music was something that we used to enjoy, like to listen to. The 6 a.m. organizers were also really massive at that time. And these were the things that we were trying to reach as, 14-year-old kids. And it obviously transformed into the liking and the loving of the craft because, as a 14-year-old, you're getting attention from other people because you're playing music from all parts of the world that people are dancing to and, enjoying. And that kind of pipeline allowed me to, explore different types of music. People were playing a lot of house music at the time. And some people continued as DJs. I unfortunately stopped for some time because I thought it wasn't really going anywhere. But then I was able to play my first gig and got that recognition. And I got the name Ergo, which is actually what I like to wear right here. And it led me to enjoying seeing the difference between someone who has the equipment, someone who has the platform, and how they can transform themselves from nothing to someone. And then I ventured off into architecture and design, which was the one thing that I was also really passionate about. I took some time off, and in around 2022, I came back with the idea of what if music and design can kind of intertwine into something that can create space for people who went through the same struggles that I did as a young guy. And that's what Studio Canvi generally is. It's creating that pipeline from your bedroom to the club, and we want to fill in that gap right in the middle to allow young people who want to play, who want to have a space to kind of expose themselves as artists, to be able to experiment and test out the sound and be able to kind of know what they like to play and know their audience and know their community. And that's what Studio Canvi necessarily is. So we combine the aspect of design, the aspect of community, the aspect of design justice as well, to be able to create an infrastructure and an ecosystem of people who are doing this collective thing of building themselves up as young artists. Thus the name CV, like you're creating your own CV in music. And that's what we stand for.
That's so cool. Did you talk about the whole process of the application?
As I said, this idea for music and bringing people together was something that I put in as my master's thesis in architecture. And it allowed me to take it from like an idea to something architecturally visible. So I could actually see the space. I could see where people would play, where equipment would sit, how much space you would need, like what materials we would use to design. And then the fund, Save the Night by Jägermeister, was the one that made it kind of tangible. And we were able to take it from paper to actually building the structure. And they've been super supportive around all of that. They were able to give us 50,000 euro, which kind of equates to about 7 million 2023. And myself and one other winner from Northern Ireland were able to kind of share this pot and come up with the two ideas that they saw fit to represent the Save the Night winners of the time. And we use this fund in building what, our HQ, Studio Canvi, the container that hosts these DJs and hosts emerging and already established artists to be able to kind of expose themselves to an international audience.
Fantastic. Well done. I wanted to come back to you, Martin. I mean, you're a founding member of Killing Joy and many other bands that you've been part of and collectives. And I find it so unique because you're one person who's been in so many groups or founded many collectives that have stood the test of time. For you, how was that experience? And what's your opinion of working independently and with groups? Because you also have the opportunity to work independently as a music producer, as a singer, but on the other side, you wear another hat with groups and bands. So, and where you at right now?
Good questions, yeah. I suppose, I think going back to failure's really important because you don't learn so much from your successes as you do your failures. And you're going to have to fail a lot before you really learn those lessons. As a producer, I think George Martin once said the art of production is tact and diplomacy. And that took me a long time to learn as a kid. And I used to have a lot of attitude and arrogance. And I was a street punk in London. Learning tact and diplomacy has been very, very still not easy. And so, but when you do something awful, then that's where you learn. So I think what I've learned is that aside from all the industry things, the actual being creative is the reward. And that's what you want to be sustained. So if I'm being creative, I'd advise any artist to get a couple of disciplines as well. So that's why I do so much just within music, because they inform each other and they help build, you learn more. But I also paint and I write. I do a lot of creative things. So I think if I'm being creative every day, I'm feeling great. If I'm not being creative every day, I get depressed. It's that simple. So anything that facilitates that creativity is really important. And actually, the real reward is just doing it. And then where it goes afterwards, it doesn't matter. If you never sell a painting, it doesn't matter. Eventually, they will sell. But just being able to do it, eventually you get good at it. And then when you get good at it, people will be queuing up to get it. It's all about the music when it's music. When I'm producing, it's all about the music. So you get the music right, everything else comes. But you've got to learn skills. You've got to learn skills of how to get the best out of the artist, which often can be being a blunt instrument and being direct. But obviously, if you can use some tact and diplomacy with that, that's even better. But you've got to learn. Those are skills you can learn. Like you can learn to draw. You don't have to be born Da Vinci or something. You can learn how to do that. And then you can apply it to what you want to do. And that's really encouraging, inspiring that anyone can do that. So it's about what comes with that then also is a commitment to yourself and your art to do it. And that could take a long time to learn because we all give ourselves a hard time about it and to really push through. And then when you start getting the feedback, then you can build on that. And then again, begin to help other people do it and develop communities and friends. And that again is the reward of it. And that keeps you going. And eventually there'll be someone who will help you monetize that. And they're really important with their lawyers, managers, publishers. They will champion you and your art and they will want you to be successful and they can deal with that. And then eventually you'll want to take that control back probably. So all those things can help facilitate your creativity. And that's really what it's about.
Kasiva, you relate. I see you nodding all through, especially when he said you just have to be creative every day. And then I thought about our journey, like when I met you at Coke Studio as a percussionist. I don't think I knew then that you could sing the way you do, but I could tell even though you hadn't started, let me not say exploring, but expressing all the different artists that are inside of you. I could still tell that you're a deep storyteller because percussions and music tells a story, you just feel it. I could hear your stories without hearing your music. And then now, years later, here you are with an EP, with an album that you co-produced and touring worldwide. For me, I've really enjoyed to see how you've keep showing us different parts of yourself. So what's next? And how did you also manage to discover these parts of you? But it's cool to see someone who has been able to do all these different things that still exist. Do you look at that as success? And what's next for you?
I definitely see it as success because it's growth and it's discovery. So what I've done for a long time is play percussion. I've always been a rhythm maker and it's always been my foundation. However, I've noticed that amongst my friends, when I'm playing stories, people pay attention. You guys are like this. And when I go home, I always ask myself, hey, Kwani, why are these people paying so much attention? It's like they don't want other people to speak. They want you to just tell the story. And that gave me the confidence to believe that there's something there. It starts by noticing it, that there's something there. And then I put work into it. First, I noticed it and then I welcomed it and I wanted to know that part of myself, that storyteller. And intricately getting to know that person made me realize that it's also a gift that has been passed on to me by my grandmother, because I started playing percussion inspired by the stories that my grandmother used to tell me. She was such a dope storyteller. With the same effect that I have is the same effect that she had on me. And so this is something that I had to stop fighting and notice it and see, okay, so how does that storyteller coexist with the percussionist? And we were just talking about it, and I told you that I discovered that person on one of the highest levels I imagine I could have been placed, which was TED Global Fellowship. So I was thrown in the deep end of storytelling at TED. TED is serious for speakers. It's like the measure of like speakers in the world. And that's where it was cemented and confirmed that si stories za jaba, ni stories za jaba na you're a speaker. And so we're doing this, Ama. And so I held that part of Kasiva and said, okay, speaker, we're walking together in this journey. So now these are two parts of Kasiva that are coexisting together. And then as I continued playing percussion and continued being on stage, they put a mic in front of me and I would sing BGVs. And when I would listen to the recordings, I'd be like, damn, oh, damn. And I fell in love with that voice. And I thought, what if that voice was brought to the front? What would happen if the voice was brought to the front? And I said, okay, I want to dare and bring that voice to the front and see kama nitajaribisha, what happens. And I'm touring my album now, so that means it worked. Yeah, something worked in there. And some skills that I have in, or that are part of that bio EPK that I was looking at. One of it is production. And I really want to delve into this one because this is one of those ones that were born out of necessity. So I had been working with my producer, Herman, for a really long time. And I was dependent on seeing him every day and sitting with him in the same room and working together on Desturi, my album. So I had been researching Desturi for over 10 years because there's something I was trying to crack. I was trying to crack the rhythm 6/8 in the African continent. And because we are so diverse in the way that we see music, I committed 10 years ago to want to understand what is the crossover of the rhythm 6/8, because I call it the rhythm of my spirit. It makes me move in incredible ways. And so as I researched and kept telling, let's do this. And man, I thank this producer because nimemzungusha sana. And boom, Herman gets a call to go to Ireland to go to study sound engineering. And so he left. And that really crippled me in the sense of that dependency that I had of seeing him every single day. So then I had to learn basic music production so that the dream of Desturi would not die. I learned how to operate Ableton or run Ableton online, and it was literally learning a new language. The way you teach a child and tell them, Sasa, Tata, Sata, and then they finally say Sasa. It's literally that, like learning from scratch. And long story short, 2025, we had an album, and now I'm touring that album. So that means I put in work. I learned how to run Ableton. We had to come up with very strange, I call them strange ways of making music, because I've always believed you have to be physically with someone to make music. I mean, it slaps proper like that, but you can make music virtually. Like we found apps that make it possible for you to be able to, it's like you're in the same room, but you're virtually collaborating in real time. And so I think through that story tells you that there's learning in the process of success. There is, I don't know something from scratch, and being humble enough and real enough to accept and tell yourself, sijui, and I need to be taught. And that was me saying, I really, really, really know percussion, but I know nothing about production and I want to learn. And through that learning curve, then came later the collaborative album that I have with Burnt. Burnt is a producer in his own right and amongst many other caps that he wears. And I continued learning production by this time that we spent together collaborating on that album. So we worked on it for 2022, Poca 2026. So that's also being in close proximity of a producer also helped me continue learning production, and that there's another album. So that means that's success in its tally. What's next is, remember me talking about the gradient of red, that gradient. So hapa ni red, alafu pink, 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 white, white, white. So for me, the gradient is moving the gradient to continue becoming more red. That's what's next for me. And what does that involve? It involves facing failure, learning as I move, discovering other parts of me. Like I'm thinking of making space and hugging the funny side of me, because I can be very funny when I'm comfortable with people. My sister can attest to that. And I want to hug and make space for these parts of me. I've also realized that I can make a good coach. So I want to hug and make space for coaching, for, one-on-one coaching. What's next? Music, fun, failure, touring, and sitting on panels like this and meeting dope people and see how you're paying attention. That's exactly what I was talking about, storytelling.
Nice. And for you too, what's next?
First of all, I want to say, I was captivated. I was listening to you the whole time. You are a great storyteller. That's something I also want to learn.
She's offering to coach us all.
Deserves.
She offered to coach me too. She you are a speaker. I will coach you. I was like, okay.
So we'll be sending quotations in the system.
For us as Studio Canvas, we just opened about 6 months ago, and I'm here with my 2 work members back then. We've learned so much.
Gang.
Yeah, and from all of this, we've seen how there's obviously an older tradition of how the creative scene has been, and there's this balance between creative strategies and the traditional side of things. And from the past couple of 6 months, we've seen that definitely we need the creative side. We need a creative strategy, because you shouldn't get permission to be able to create things. I mean, being visible or being known by people doesn't come from just the hype that you create. It comes from, the structures that you put in. Structure is a thing that pays. But then also at the same time, we need to follow a structure of tradition. And it comes to a point where some emerging DJs find it really tricky to be able to get that exposure that they want. It's a bit unstable in some certain situations. For me as a DJ as well, I've gone through the same thing. And that's why Studio Canvas, we don't want to kind of select an artist and say, we want you to come and play. We want everyone who has this inkling to be able to say something, to come and explore, to come and test out, to feel safe. And if we create this ecosystem, I think it'll allow a small shift in the creative culture in Nairobi. For me, success doesn't mean having a sold out event or a viral clip on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. For me, it shows that if someone gets booked, one guy gets booked from the studio who's done a set and has posted it online and they get booked, that's a win for me. If an international artist or promoter shouts us out saying, oh, this is some great music that's being played in Kenya, that's a win for me. If this thing is sustainable and can kind of sustain itself through the income that it's getting and the archive of music that we're putting out, that's a win for me. If we're able to kind of just shift that just a tiny bit in this creative industry of ours, for me, that's a big win. And I think I've learned quite a bit from, all the DJs who are already established. For example, Pops is right here, big DJ. And then there's some people who are still learning for the first time. There's a young man called Shuja. He's about 16 years of age who came to the studio. And he wanted to just have access to be able to, show that he can DJ. But at an age like that, it's very hard to get from your room to the club. So you need a buffer point. And for me, that was a big win for him to play. And a couple of weeks later, he gets booked to play at Nari's Cafe party. That for me is a massive win, And being able to just allow people to come into a safe space and show that they feel safe and comfortable and be able to reach a wider audience, an international audience, that's a big win for me. I think that's what success for the studio, means to me.
Amazing. Next step, what's next, Martin? What's next, Jesse?
As you said, it's just movement, changing the failures that come with the studio. There's some opportunities that we've missed, but then there's also doors that have opened through these missed opportunities. There's relationships that we've gained, some that we've lost. All of these kind of attain into one bowl that we call, this pilau. There's all the spices, all the ingredients, everything that comes into our bowl of success. Right now, we don't want to say that, our goal is to do so and so and to make this amount of money, but we want to be able to make a small change in this creative industry of ours, which I think people think is, our older generation definitely think that the creative industry is a hobby or something that you do for fun. But then if you treat it like something important, like a business, as something that you can gain, you can make yourself happy with, you can gain some financial income with it, or even societal impact, we should treat it as if it means something. And if we are able to create that change, some small of it, then I'm super happy. That's what's nice.
I want to just add something. You've just ticked my mind when you said exposure, and then I felt my heart jump. And then, so while you were speaking, I was trying to resolve, what does that word exposure, why is it
like
threatening, triggering? It's triggering. I deconstructed it as you went, and I realized that success is dimmed or destroyed by comparison. If you got high-fived, shout-outed by a DJ, a particular DJ, and then this other person gets high-fived, shout-outed by an international DJ per se, you start comparing this shout-out to this shout-out and saying that this shout-out is bigger, not understanding the structure that you spoke about and the steps that you need to step towards to getting bigger shout-outs. And one of these steps is that thing that made me jump that's called exposure. And I realized that we're discomforted by exposure because we don't know what to do with it. Think about it. Ukipata gig, guys come and complain, I don't want to go for that gig, gig exposure. That's what Kenyans say, gig exposure. Umsana nchukulia then anpatia gig exposure. But isn't Super Bowl exposure? But what you choose to do with that slot is what defines if that chunk of time or that opportunity is defined as success, isn't it? Because kaje kumpata gig exposure, and in that exposure is where you find networks. In that exposure is where you find your next gig, and that means you're making movement, and that means you're successful. So I think we are disturbed, and I'm telling myself, Kasiva, I'm being disturbed by the word exposure because many times we don't know what to do with that exposure. It's the unpreparedness of exposure that makes us panic towards it, because exposure is a step towards being successful. If you're not exposed, if I don't expose this ring, you won't know that there's a beautiful ring sat on my finger. So you have to expose it for you to see. I'm getting philosophical, but yes, I think you get it.
I mean, we all have our own sentiments about exposures, or that person who always calls you or gives you unpaid gig over and over and over. So for me, I think the question is, to what extent? Yes. Are you going to call me 5 times to do the same thing and not pay me, yet I already showed you my value and you know I'm a professional? So, but for me personally, I think everybody has their own standards and all. I take any opportunity, even if exposure, as serious as I would take a gig. And I feel like you're never too big for exposure. But in my experience working with artists, a lot of artists get to a level they're like, nah, I'm too big. Let alone exposure, even interviews, like, siyezifanya hiyo interview, why should I? So, and I have to beg you for you to promote yourself, you know. But even for me, I've taken a lot of gigs that did not pay me, but I always say no one will ever know, because once I post anything on our work page, everybody is like, oh, are you guys working with these people? And I'm just like, yes, we are. And that gets me my next gig, because from the outside perspective, she's a working publicist. You'll never know this was a paid gig, this wasn't a paid gig, but I have to be strategic as a business person and as a creator and as a creative and as someone who's out there hustling, because it's a hustle out here, and tell myself, like, how do I position myself for the next opportunity? And I think those are some of the questions we have to ask ourselves as we chase success, and as we ask ourselves, what success are we chasing? If you're chasing for somebody to pay you 50K or 20K and they told you, I'm offering you this gig, I'm not going to give you 20K, but there's this number of people performing, and that's not success for you, I guess that's also your own definition of success, and it's okay. But what I'm saying is, someone might not give you that 20K, 30K, or 50K, but you might be at the venue and get booked.
Being talented can only take you so far. Being strategic takes you from being like good to being great. If you set your own systems and structures where you can create your own stuff and align yourself in a way where you're being seen, you're being heard, you're bringing value, you change your mindset from please book me to like, here's a value that I bring. That's when you start to recognize, okay, this can become financially viable, this can become emotionally, even physically viable. You start to change how you look, how you dress, how you feel. And this is from, becoming very strategic with what you're doing. And it doesn't only go for music. I think it goes for anything else. Going to the gym, going to work, like making friends, all that stuff. You have to have some structure to it.
And also, it's probably worth remembering that the only real problem you're going to have in life is dealing with yourself. So deal with that first. And then the only competition you're ever going to have is yourself. So you deal with that. And then it's about taking on the challenges that make you feel uncomfortable, working in areas that you're not used to. When you do that and it works, you get more confidence. The more confidence you have, the more opportunities that come, the more things you'll do because you're not afraid of doing them. I believe intrinsically, everybody is an artist. Everybody has a story. Everybody has something to say. And to be able to help facilitate that for other people. Actually, as a producer, it's much easier for me to produce other people and pull that genius out of them than it is to do it for myself. Because with yourself, you're going to be a lot harder. But the real reward is facilitating other people's creativity and their success. We were doing some recording in Kilifi at Baobab Studios last week with this incredible musician, Michel Ongaru. He's been blind since 2. He's one of the top 10 musicians I have ever worked with. And I was telling him that. Now, today we also all have to be, our own promoters with the socials and all that. That doesn't always come easy. But I put a post up and I said, this musician, the musicianship's here, world class, as good as I've ever seen anywhere. And this guitarist is in my top 10 guitarists I've ever worked with. That post got liked by David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. That may not seem like a big deal, but it was a big deal to Michel when I told him. And that could lead on to collaborations, who knows what. So being generous with your facilitation of other artists is really important because that will encourage other people to want to work with you as well, I think. And that is success. And all of that, I think, can build communities. Everybody's help facilitating everybody else and encouraging everybody else to go further and push harder. Things start happening when you do that. And so often artists can be, I don't want to work with them. I'm on my own scene, or my own thing, and I don't want to share my secrets. They'll never get out of their bedroom. When you're open and you're generous, then things come to you. And it's a weird thing, but that's how I found it works.
Okay, we have come to the time when we'd love your contribution. Any questions if you have for any of the panelists?
My name is Tabiti. I'm a filmmaker. I'm getting into PR. I am an electronic music enthusiast. And thank you for this conversation. It's very interesting for me specifically today because First of all, the word imposter syndrome. It's a room full of artists. I think we deal with that goblin from time to time. And sometimes it's internal, sometimes it's external. Had an interesting experience yesterday. I mentioned in a space, I was talking to someone, and I mentioned that I am an electronic music enthusiast. And this is someone who's older in the space. And they used a very shallow marker to, sort of question whether I was actually into electronic music. So how do you protect what you know as your truth?
They doubted what
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
passionate about.
So he asked if I had experienced something to an event, and I had never. And they're like, and they went on and on and on. Yeah. So luckily, because I come from a very stable household, it is very difficult for people to convince me out of my dopeness. But I still thought about it. Yeah. So how do you protect your truth from external noise? Like, I know I'm dope. I know you like this thing. How do you protect that? Because it's constantly going to be noise and people doubting your dopeness.
That's a very deep question. I'll echo what he said. You have to deal with yourself first. Because if you deal with yourself, then there's nothing to protect. I think that's what I'll say. You have to deal with yourself. If you do, then there's nothing to protect. Yeah.
For me, I think there's nobody who knows me better than I know myself. So if you have a problem with how I do what I do, that's your problem. That's always been my attitude. I can't convince you to like what I like. I can't convince you to see the vision of what I see. Actually, I always say we can agree to disagree. Yeah.
And when you get confident, and as you get more confident, you seek less approval from other people, and you're less affected. The paradox is, to be a really great artist, you have to be very vulnerable in public. And so people are going to shoot you down, you have trolls. But as you get more confident, that becomes less and less important because it just doesn't affect how you feel. And your confidence overrides it. And you just have to develop that simultaneous thing of being more open, more authentic, more vulnerable. And that gives you strength to overcome anybody who disagrees with that or doesn't like it.
And I think it also helps the kind of company you keep. Because like she was talking about her friends and her stories, and she was like, hey, my friends be feeling my stories. So sometimes it's cool to also hang out with people who give you those affirmations. Not just yes people to everything, but also people who are like-minded, maybe artists like you are. It does help.
Hello, my name is Claire. I am an entertainment journalist. First of all, Tapiti, you're dope. Kasiva, you talked about, I love this really, by the way. I'm excited to see your new EPK. You talked about gig exposure. I love your concept of the ring. And Anyiko got into it in a very interesting manner of the exposure until when. So this is Kenya, and we all know how, and Africa in general, as a journalist, I'll tell you, the African creative economy is something else. But 5% plus contributes to the GDP of the creative economy. So how can we bridge the gap between the exposure and the money? Because we are creatives, we need our money.
Dope question. Very short answers. So you've called for me a gig for exposure. Enter knowing what you're going to do with that exposure. So find another form of value for the exposure. Because at this point, we're looking at the form of value to be currency, to be money. There's other forms of value that you can get from a situation. So find different forms of value. How do we bridge exposure na the financial aspect? It all revolves around the value. So if I'm not getting currency, I'm getting networks, I'm getting information, I'm getting skills, I'm moving in the definition of success. As we said, I'm moving within this whole ecosystem of this exposure gig. And part of moving is also deconstructing what opportunities are, because an opportunity can be, this is an opportunity of sitting in a panel hosted by Anyiko. An opportunity can be Jesse hosting his own panel, which is him creating from skill sets that he has learned, or that he has been exposed to. So what I'm trying to say is I think we need to redefine what the market is. We can play gigs that are there, established by people, and we can make our own little spaces. I'll give you an example. I've always wanted to, as someone who likes storytelling and kupiga story, I've always wanted to know and understand and hear my fellow female creative stories. And I've always wanted to understand, how did you get there and what kind of challenges did you go through? What kind of successes did you encounter in your life? I've been passionate about resolving the challenges, because you can't keep saying, this has been my problem. It becomes your story, and we're trying to move. So I went on Instagram one day during the pandemic and nikaanza kupiga stories za jaba hapo. And later on, I called one creative friend of mine and we went live and we spoke about our lives in the industry and how we have it in the industry and some challenges, and we tried to brainstorm and resolve these challenges. And that action of me going on Instagram live grew to become a platform called Vibe na Queen, which is an online platform that has been funded before. That is a platform where we sit, talk about our stories, deconstruct our music, jam live, like a hangout, the way you can go pint and start singing and making merry, or that drunkard guy who comes home singing. It's natural to just jam. So it's a space where we're jamming naturally, telling our stories, talking about our challenges, but also brainstorming to find solutions. It's a space that was not there, but it was created out of necessity. So what I'm trying to say is this contribution to that GDP comes from also us creating our own little spaces and seeing, and now putting in work and strategy, as he said, to see how now this creates value. And then going back to what is value? Yes.
My name is Jay. I work as a creative consultant and an artist when no one's looking. This has been the best panel so far, and I've been here all week. Here's my question, and you guys represent very key interests that I have. I guess that's why I'm really enjoying it. I have interest in artistry, the space of nightlife and DJing, and one day running a label. So my question for all of you is on like 3 fronts: business, operations, and a human level. What's the number one problem to solve for artists, DJs, and the people running the major labels?
That's a great question. The main problem that we would have is sustaining like ourselves, our mental, our emotions, not being hurt so much by what other people say, being vulnerable and having this imposter syndrome that many people have. That's one thing that creatives really struggle from. And we usually get this creative block where you feel like you cannot create anything because it's not good enough, and you get stuck and eventually you stop. That's the main challenge for creatives. One thing to get out of that, as everyone here said, is that to understand yourself, fully understand what you want, get to know yourself. In fact, there's this video I watched on TikTok about how this lady was saying how in a month you get this amount of money and you wonder, okay, where the hell has this money gone at the end of the month? You spent it buying clothes that you don't necessarily like, or you spend it on things that you don't necessarily like as well. It's because you don't necessarily know yourself. If you knew yourself, you know exactly what you like and how much you want to spend and where it's going. And that translates into the creative side as well. If you know who you are, if you know what you want, you put your focus in those things, and that will take you the farthest because you know yourself and you know what you want. From the business side, I think is also sustaining, this system that you've created. If you don't put structures in place where it's giving back to itself, this ecosystem will just lapse and fall and crumble into itself. You need to invest, keep on trusting the people around you. Well, not so much, but then, you also want to have a good circle of people around that elevate and push you to this desired outcome that you want, and just keep at that kind of goal. being able to sustain yourself mentally is also a really big thing for, I think, many artists. So, I mean, for me, that's my basic answer. I don't know if I've touched everything with the record label because I haven't had one. Maybe that's something you could probably go.
I've always seen it like we're in the creative industries. Those industries and corporations are there to exploit your talent for their financial gain. So you can flip that and like perceive it as they're there for you to exploit them for your creative gain, whatever that is. And that's an interesting perception twist, but it's an important one because you're no longer the victim, you're the one driving. And you can then harness whatever assets they have to apply to your own creative work and exploit that. So it works. It's like with social media or YouTube, you know, you could be there on there for hours doom scrolling, getting nowhere. But actually, if you apply it strategically and you make creative content, especially with YouTube, I mean, I know quite a lot of artists now, people who restore buildings are making £20,000 a month from YouTube, which enables them to do another one and another one. And I mean, it's a whole different skill set, but they're exploiting those systems for what they want to do, and it's working for them. And I think, again, that's kind of a mindset. So whatever you post and whatever you do, it's the end game should be to promote the work that you're producing. And hopefully that will filter through as some financial gain in the end.
So my name is Toriso Musaneke. I'm from South Africa, independent contractor, but I'm also with Unique, one of the funders of Frequency Shift. So yeah, so thank you so much. I've really learned a lot. So I'm just coming in, I think, as an individual who also comes from a dramatic arts background, you know. So for the first 6 years of working in the creative economy in South Africa, I was a practitioner. And years later, I'm 35, and there are a lot of things that I'm questioning, right, around value and economic value, etc. So I think I just want to touch on something regarding the conversation of exposure, which I think we really need to deal with in our industry. And it's that when you think about resolving challenges, I think one of the challenge is exploitation. And I think this is what creates a very different dynamic in the conversation of exposure, right? Value as well as ethics. And when you think about the rights of artists, lack of regulations and unions, it's also up to, I believe, our generation to really rebuild on an ecosystem where there's trust, there's integrity, and good governance, you know? That's all of you.
Following on from Brack, yeah, I mean, it's like a mycelium network of cooperation, I think. And when you build communities, a lot of bartering goes on now. So there may not be funds, but you could say, look, I really like your music. I'll do a remix for you. Can you do a remix for me? Things like that are happening all the time. And those can move things on a bit and get those wheels turning. And being positive, not getting pulled down by the negative, really. And even when it can look really negative, finding the positive there and amplifying that. And people will want to work with you and want to do things with you, and you can exchange, and you know the benefits double and double and double when you do that. So that's something I'd really see more of today, and I think it's a really good idea.
The traditional standard, good governance, absolutely. I think we need to possibly fight for good promotion, good event organizers, and also just put some funding and respect on the creative industry, because once that's put down, I mean, the funding will come, the partnerships will come, the collaborations will come. So yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much to my amazing panelists this week, Kasiva Mutua, Jesse Mwenda, Martin Youth Glover. And I'm also very thankful to Kilele Summit and community for hosting us at Industry Talks. At Kilele Summit, it was such a wonderful time. It was such a wonderful conversation. It was also really great to see what Kilele team and Santuri team are doing at the Mall Westland. So if you have a chance, please go over to the mall and see what they've been doing in terms of refurbishing the space and inviting other creatives to come to one place where we can all move the industry forward. that's it from today's episode. We look forward to seeing you next week for yet another amazing conversation. We're going to be diving deeper into events and production. But for now, if you have any feedback, comments, or suggestions, please follow Anyiko PR. You can follow Anyiko TV or my own profile, Anyiko Owoko. Please leave your feedback with us and we'll get back to you. Until then, see you next week. Ciao, ciao. VIP Access Season 5 is proudly supported by the Goethe Institute, Nairobi.